Hi, welcome back to Slick Willy Fly. So this morning I was all set to go fishing, except Mother Nature is not cooperating. It's just howling and it's awful. Typical Saturday. It'll be beautiful on Monday again when I'm at work. So it's about 5 in the morning, having a cup of coffee, and decided to make some flies that are going to be on their way to Slidell in Louisiana. And I just got to thinking, like, I keep getting asked, how do I get these silly legs blended in with the EP fiber so nicely? Is there a trick? And I said, oh, perfect opportunity to make a fly and show you how I handle the silly legs. So hope you have a cup of coffee. It's 5 in the morning, and let's change the angle and jump in on this fly. Okay, to start the video, so what I'm using is 140 denier black thread. I can't really show you that right now. For the Dumbell eyes, I'm using these brass MFC. These are cool. These are sparkle eyes. I think these are really kind of cool. For the deer body, I'm using a combination of purple deer hair and black deer hair. Nothing super fancy there. And then I'm using EP brush, an EP brush in purple. That's it. A little Krystal flash for my hook. Oh, and my silly legs. My silly legs are purple hot pink. That's pretty much all I'm using in this fly, and I've got a bunch of it pre-prepped. Yeah, so all I've done is put a base of black thread, and now I'm going to go ahead and attach my Dumbell eye the way we always attach Dumbell eyes. And again, I don't like to put my Dumbell eyes right at the back of the fly, at the eye of the fly. I prefer to have this sink a little bit more than just a straight jigging action. So my eyes are now attached and hard. Like that, nice and hard. Came out good. I checked that they're centered. And now I'm going to go ahead and give them a little touch of super glue. Because I don't want them to move. Okay, so now it's a little bit of a decision. I could start with purple deer hair and wrap it with black, or I could start with black and wrap it with purple. I think that since I'm going to use a purple EP brush, I'm going to put the purple deer hair on first. And all I'm going to do is take a small clump. And I didn't pre-prep anything, so I might do a little bit of fast forwarding through this video. But, you know, I like to do my videos in one take. I like that you get to see what it's really like. You'll see anything that goes wrong. You'll see how I correct any errors. So I want this to have some length to it. So I want to say at least a hook shank for the first clump. And I like to trim them up. I think by making the end square, it makes it just a much neater tie-in. So what I did there is I turning my thread to the left this way, and what that does is that makes the thread wrap nicely back towards my fingers the way I want. And all I did there was make a couple of loose wraps, and now I'm going to make sure that I'm around the hook nicely and that I like the length. Could still pull out anything that's way too long. And now I'm still not going to pull tight. We'll pull a little tight there. And that's exactly why. I'm not trying to flare this yet. I'm going to capture all my deer hair. And once I've captured all my deer hair, and I do like where it's sitting, now I can pull tight on this. And yeah, you saw the end flared a little bit, but it's still fairly under control. But it is nice and hard on there. And that's kind of what I was going for right there. Looks clean. Anything that's too crazy, I just rip off. It's just deer hair. There's plenty more material is going to be on this fly. All right. So I like the way that looks. Nice and all the way around the hook. Looks good. So now I want to put on my eyes. For eyes, I have homemade eyes. I could put a link in the video to how I make my eyes. And for this particular fly, I've decided to go with, it's actually a green Sharpie when I make it, but it looks a little bit yellowish. So I really love the way this color turns out. So these are the eyes I'm going to use. Now you got to remember when you're doing this that because of the dumbbell eyes, this will ride hook up. So when you're attaching your eyes, you want to make sure that you attach your eyes remembering that these are going to ride hook up. And I actually like to make my eyes quite long, longer than most. Although that's a little too long. I'll trim just a little bit off that eye. Now I'm going to give it just a couple of loose wraps, making sure I like the placement, which I do. And now I could crank down hard on that eye. And now I could repeat on the opposite side. I like to put it in this orientation first, just to make sure that I like the length. By doing the loose wraps, I could always adjust the placement just to make sure that I like the way they look. I like for my eyes to look nice and even, or as even as possible. And that's why I like 140 denier thread. I'm sure you heard that. Gotta be careful with your thread. I like the way those eyes turned out. Nice. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little clump of black deer hair. Don't need much. I'm just trying to get some additional color in there. And this black and purple combination in Louisiana seems to be an absolute killer. Okay, so I've taken out all the shorts again, all the little guard hairs. So now I don't want this one to be much shorter. I want it to be just a little shorter than the purple. So now I've got my length, so I'm going to trim it. And I can actually start at the dumbbell eyes because I have my length now. I'm gonna still give it that spin because I do want this to turn the right way. Just like that. That little trick right there, if nothing else, just turning the bodkin so you can get the thread to wrap the right way for you. That's a great little trick. And now I'm doing loose, very loose wraps all the way to where I want this to tie in. Now I'm going to make sure I spread it with my fingers. Not really worried about going too crazy. I don't mind it if it stays more on the bottom half and leaves more purple on the top, because remember, this is the bottom. So now I'm holding it, and now I can pull tight and crank that back to my dumbbell eyes, securing that in nice and hard. Okay, so now we come to the Krystal Flash portion of this fly. For Krystal Flash, I'm going to use one strand of black and silver. So this particular fly that we call a critter, it's a type of, it's a crustacean, let's say. We're imitating a crustacean. Don't really know if we're imitating a a crab or a shrimp, but just a crustacean. So I folded over my Krystal Flash, as you see there. I'm going to go ahead and put it on one side. Remember, this is the top. this is the bottom underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and put it so it's a little bit more towards the bottom. A couple of loose wraps. Crank that hard. Take it to the opposite side. Get that cranked in hard. Make sure I like the placement. And now I'm going to cut it to about the same length as the opposite side. Something like that. Okay, so the Krystal flash is done. The deer hair is done. And now the whole point of the video. I don't want my Krystal flash going down like that. I want my Krystal flash to sit like that. That's better. Man, it is just howling out there. Of course it's howling. I have a day off today. Alright, so we're done with the Krystal flash. Looks good. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just attach a little piece of leftover EP brush. I think I have enough for this fly with this little piece of brush here. And I'm just going to go ahead and attach this in. And now I can go ahead and get a piece of silly legs. Here are my silly legs. And I'm just going to pop off 3 strands or 3 legs. 1, 2. They kind of like to stick together a little. That looks like 3. Pop off 3. Just like that. Alright, so now I take my first set of legs and I put them as even as I can on the hook. These are going to get trimmed, so you don't have to worry about any little nubs or anything on the ends. But you do want to get them somewhat even. And I'm going to go ahead and put these right on top of the hook. And I'm going to lock this in. And I'm just going to let it sit there. I'm going to move my thread up a bit. I'm going to get the next set of legs. And I'm going to repeat the process. And all I'm doing is placing these legs about where I want them to come out of the body. Give it kind of a little crustacean kind of look. I mean, we call this a critter. You know, like I said, is it a crab? Is it a shrimp? Is it just a swamp thing? Who knows? But in that, you know, kind of murky water, that dark water, this will fool a redfish. Makes them crazy, actually. Something about this black and purple just makes them crazy. All right, so now I'm going to bring my thread under the eyes. I got all 3 attached, and now I just do a couple of loose wraps. 1, 2. Super simple. Get the next set of eyes carefully. Bring them over. Carefully. Bring everything over. And again, 1, 2. It's important that I always do 2 wraps, because when I unwrap, I want to know how many I'm doing. So now obviously it's the 3rd set of eyes. And now I've done 2 wraps on all the set of eyes. So now my eyes are out of the way. So now I could take my EP brush and I could just start bringing it towards the dumbbell eyes. Like always, I just try to draw everything back. I'm not going to be especially tight with this. It's a lot of brush. It's a lot of fibers on this brush. So that's plenty right there. 2 wraps or a wrap and a half. Unwrap 2. Bring my rubber legs up. Split my rubber legs. Start to make sure that as I'm continue wrapping up with this brush, not only am I drawing everything back, but I'm also making sure that my rubber legs ended up where I wanted them, which they did. Can do one more wrap. Unwrap the next set of legs. Put them where they're supposed to be. Sometimes in fly tying, we want 3 hands. But this works. You just take your time, get everything where you want it, making sure that everything ends up right where you want it. Could have made my life a little easier and use a little bit longer EP brush. But it worked. It worked fine. Good wrap there. And now I'm going to bring my thread back. I'm going to capture that brush, which I know I captured because I still have a piece of wire right there, and give that a couple wraps. And now I'm going to get my wire cutter because I don't want to ruin my scissors, and at the same time it's too small a piece for me to ring off. So I just got that down. Make sure I fold that little nub. That's why I like to ring off instead. Bring my thread out of the way. So now I'm just going to take a needle. You could take a comb. You can do anything you want. And I just kind of bring out all these fibers, which I'm going to trim. You can use a smaller brush. I don't usually buy smaller brushes. You could trim the brush before you start working everything if you really wanted. I'd rather trim the fly. Definitely going to fast forward through the fly trimming process because you have to be careful when you trim the fly. You have to be careful not to cut your Krystal flash, and you have to be careful not to cut your legs. I mean, you don't really have to trim so much. I just want the eyes to stick out, and I want the deer hair to stick out. So I'm going to trim a little. But that's a really cool fly right there, really buggy. I mean, you could fish the fly exactly the way it is right now, and that fly will catch fish. But I'm going to go ahead and put a whip finish in. A little piece of deer hair there. Get everything out of the way. Make this head just a little bit bigger. Give it a little bit of a cone shape. Which for some reason I prefer. I just think it looks better. And now I can whip finish it. And before I start to think about putting any kind of a UV resin on, I'm going to trim, because I don't want anything to accidentally stick to the UV resin. So I'm going to pop it out of the vise. I'm going to go ahead and trim and be right back. Alright, so now I've trimmed up the fly, and what the next step for me is to go ahead and trim up these legs. So what I like to do is I like to take them all together, and remember, if you stretch them, they're going to end up much shorter than what you would have wanted. So I've basically got them all together. And I know my length, I've done this a bunch of times. So I know that that's about the length that I want. How do I describe it? I'm not sure. I just kind of know my length. and I trim them all together. And by doing it that way, they kind of end up looking really nice. They're not exactly the same length. They got a good little stagger to them. And the last thing that I'm gonna do to this fly is I think I'm gonna go ahead and attach my thread again and maybe put a weed guard, I'm not sure, torn on the weed guard. We'll leave it for another day. I like the way this looks. Remember, this fly will ride, it's gonna ride like that. All right, so welcome back. So there it is. Hope this video helped, the way I distribute the legs. It's a great fly. You can tie it in a variety of sizes. Remember, I'd like to match the size of my hook to what I think is going to be the size of the fish that I'm chasing. You can tie it in a variety of colors. Here's a little bit more tan and pink version. Little salmon pink. Whoops, dropped it. Here's on a slightly smaller hook. So it's just really up to, you know, your imagination. This one's two-tone. That's a really cool little bug right there. I love this little fly. But hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you got some good tips. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Good luck catching, and see you in the next video.